Welcome to another edition of Down the Road with me, Joel Heitkamp. You can see how I'm dressed, right? It's a big weekend coming up. Finally, North Dakota State University is going to make that trek north to Grand Forks, and they're actually going to play at the home of the Fighting Hawks. And so that hasn't happened in a long, long time. And so who knows what's going to happen. NDSU is obviously the favorite, but at least they're playing at UND's home once. So we're going to talk to some folks. We're going to visit with Max Schneider, who is on University of North Dakota's national championship team. Also, Brock Jensen, who quarterbacked the Bison to 3 national championship teams. Now, that's a pretty good record. But first, a man that many of you are going to want to know how he's doing. And that is our lone United States Congressman from the great state of North Dakota, Kelly Armstrong. Congressman Armstrong, good to have you coming down the road with us.
Thanks for having me, and I'm sure Mac and I both agree that we hope the UND wins this game this weekend, and I can come out for him or against him, whatever helps him get appointed to U.S. Attorney quicker.
Well, yeah, exactly. Why the appointment hasn't happened yet is beyond me. But, you know, I haven't picked a team in this game yet. Oh, wait. No, I wore this shirt today. So, yeah, I've picked a team as well. We might be the only ones that 3 people on my radio show today, everybody was Bison. I mean, everybody was Bison. Luckily, we had Coach Lennon on from UND just so that we could have some UND presence. But Congressman Armstrong, you know, the announcement came that you had contracted COVID and you went into self-quarantine. How are you?
I'm sick. I'm not real sick. I told my wife it feels like a bad cold, and she said, "Well, you're a man, so that means you're close to death." But that was just a joke. So I had the first 2 days, Joel, it was like a really bad flu, and now it's like a really bad head cold. I'm glad I had the vaccine. I'm glad my wife and daughter had the vaccine. It made quarantine. I mean, we're still following all the precautions, but it's just probation. It's not double secret probation. So we're getting through it.
Do you or did you lose your sense of taste and smell?
I didn't, and I never had a fever. So, you know, it just shows this manifests so differently in so many different people.
I think it also shows that the vaccine helped.
Hey, listen, I'm a small town lawyer from Western North Dakota and now a professional politician, I guess. I'll tell you what my doctors told me. I went into urgent care in Bismarck just like everybody else does when they have these kind of issues. And I'm just telling you, my nurse practitioner was like, we're glad you have the vaccine. It's helpful.
Well, we're glad you're doing okay. When is the quarantine up, or the self-quarantine?
Well, the quarantine's supposed to be over on October 4th, but, you know, if I'm still showing symptoms, I'm going to talk to my doctor. And I mean, the last thing I want to do is be out there and give this to somebody else. So we'll deal with it. I may quarantine out at my farm if I have to moving forward, because we're getting into, you know, leaves turning color and pheasants starting to crow. So
yeah. How does this work with you voting? Obviously, the House is all over the media right now with the infrastructure bill and the reconciliation bill, and a lot of people just simply counting votes, whether or not Nancy Pelosi has the votes to kind of, quite frankly, go around a real progressive side of her caucus. And so are you still dealt a hand in that? Can you do that from afar?
Yes, I had not participated in proxy voting until Monday of this week. And actually, that's part of the reason I did the announcement the way I did it. You know, I think we owe it to our constituents to keep them informed, but I'm not going to give everybody updates constantly on my medical condition. But I think it would have been noticed if I wasn't in DC, given the schedule that was going on this week. So I utilize proxy voting, and I still don't support proxy voting, but I'm going to play with the rules as they are, not the rules as I wish they were, particularly as important as everything going on this week.
Well, I mean, that's the hook, right? I mean, I think people can understand when you're down with COVID if you can't vote. I think people have enough common sense on that, but these votes are going to be so close, Congressman.
Yeah, and in all honesty, if the only people who were voting by proxy were voting by proxy because of medical reasons, I think there would be a different version of that. But listen, both sides have, I don't know if abused the system is the right word, but we'll just say taken full advantage of it.
Well, and that happens at the local level too. There's no question about that. I've seen both parties do it, and it leaves me scratching my head because you're supposed to be there to hear the debate. You're supposed to be there to interact with people. People are supposed to be able to, that are your colleagues, grab you and say, Kelly, have you thought of this? And so I get it. I understand it.
And I will tell you, the remote hearings and all of that is really, I moved to a new committee this Congress, and the relationship building is a lot harder to do. Even though you can communicate with people on hearing via Zoom, most of my best relations with Democrats on judiciary, which was a pretty toxic committee for 2 years, were made during breaks or walking to and from the Capitol floor. That really, and when things like this happen in Congress, Joel, it'll never go back to being the same. Something will always be a little different. And I really hope we don't lose that.
Well, that was happening as well when you were a state senator. I mean, a lot of the work got done in the Great Hall. So I know.
Well, and I know we're going to talk about partisan stuff and deal with infrastructure and reconciliation, but I just want to point out those relationships really matter. On Monday, we got the Equal Act passed on the floor of the House, which is a crack parity and sentencing bill. Obviously, something I probably care a lot about, being a former criminal defense attorney. But it was Hakeem Jeffries and I were co-sponsors of the bill, and this was all developed. Actually, our relationship built after we yelled at each other in a hearing, and after we took a break, we started talking about things we could work together on.
Well, and that's the way government's supposed to work. So that's a good thing. But we are going to talk about some of the things that are going on right now that has the nation's attention. And that is the reconciliation, and that being tied to the infrastructure bill. Now, and it's my side of the aisle on the far left progressive side that is demanding that those two be linked together. Those of us that are center right on the Democratic side believe pass the infrastructure bill. Pass it. Work on the reconciliation bill another day. Live to fight another day. That being said, I haven't seen, and maybe I'm wrong, and you can correct me, that you have come out in favor of the infrastructure bill. If that was the only bill in front of you, would you vote for it?
No, I haven't. I don't have that option right now. And I came out actually in opposition to the infrastructure bill. And the reason is, well, there's a couple reasons. One is nobody asked my opinion on some of it, and I do have some problems with it. That being said, if reconciliation was dead and buried, we'd take a look. But and I think this is a function a little bit of how the House and the Senate works. There is nobody on the other side of the aisle in the House that hasn't intrinsically linked these two bills together. So I don't treat them as two separate bills. I treat them as one total bill. I think, and I've told many people this, I think in order to treat them as two separate bills, you have to do some pretty significant intellectual gymnastics to do that right now, given everything that's come out of the leader's office, and to be quite honest, everybody else on the Democratic side in the House.
Well, that's a political strategy, not a text strategy. I mean, the verbiage is different, the policy is different, the law, should you make it, is different. And so they are separate. It's just a matter of how they're brought to you to vote. And if
I don't think they can pass the reconciliation bill if they don't pass the infrastructure bill. So I don't think they're separate.
Well,
and I think the reconciliation bill is unbelievably terrible, not just for Republicans, not just from conservative viewpoints, but for the state of North Dakota.
Well, I think the reconciliation bill goes too far. I'm sitting there talking to one of my Democratic friends the other night and trying to explain what's in it and why Senator Manchin should be heard on it, and why people should really take a look at how far it goes and how far reaching. And I'm not sure I could support it, but I'll tell you what, if they put the infrastructure bill in front of me, if I was sitting in your chair, I'd vote for it. I mean, yeah. Senators Conrad and Senator Hoeven came out in favor of it. And so I guess I have to ask you, why? What's in the infrastructure bill that doesn't deserve your support?
Well, there's plenty in there. That's the part of, negotiating. There's $7.5 billion for charging stations, $70 billion for transmission and battery storage, but we don't do anything about permitting or litigation reform, which means this money is not being spent very well. $66 billion for passenger rail, and another $90+ billion for transit after they already got $70 billion in the Clean Futures Act. But I think also more importantly, we have $1 billion sitting in North Dakota. The governor just brought his plan out yesterday. We're going into special session. The governor wants to spend $237 million in infrastructure, $134 million in emergency services, and $325+ economic development. And my guess, just my guess, is by the time we get through the legislative session, more of that money will go to infrastructure, not less. So, I mean, we continue to move down this path. We continue to do it. But more importantly, everything regarding these two bills is being negotiated between moderate Democrats and progressive Democrats. And Republicans in the House aren't even at the negotiating table.
You know, but that's called being in the minority. The Democrats have felt that same way before.
I agree, but then they need to pass it without my vote.
Yeah. Well, let me throw this at you. You know, and they probably can't pass it out without votes like yours. Now, I think they'll find Republican votes that, you know, you can go through the list, but there's always going to be something in it that doesn't help North Dakota, and there's going to be things in it that do help North Dakota. I remember speaking to an urban congresswoman one time, and I was trying to explain federal crop insurance. And she had no concept of federal crop insurance and what it does. So I get it. I understand it. If you walk out the door right now, you're going to find my Ford F-150 is a 6-cylinder, burns gas. I wish it got a little better mileage, but I think it does just fine. And I like it. So trust me, I don't need a charging station, but someday I will. And to have enough in a rural state where it's a lot of distance and a lot of miles, I don't know why you wouldn't support charging stations.
Well, I don't support them because of how I don't support them simply because, you know, we've had 13 hearings on the Clean Futures Act in Energy and Commerce, roughly. And there's not a single piece in either any of this legislation that's come through our committee that deals with permitting reform or litigation reform. And without those things, you're throwing this money away. That's the point. It's not that it's going to succeed, it's that it's going to fail. If you think it's hard to put a pipeline in eastern Montana, try running a high voltage transmission line through a wealthy suburb in New Hampshire. We've taught them how to stop these projects, even by that side of the aisle's easiest accounts. It takes 2.5 times more transmission infrastructure to deal with the plans they're promoting, and they don't do anything to get the infrastructure in the ground. It's the definition of too much money, cart before the horse, and they're not dealing with the issues they have to deal with in order. Even if I disagree with it, I would prefer that they put it together in a way that it could actually get in the ground.
But Congressman, what happens? Because the auto industry has decided by X date, each manufacturer different, that we will be electric. Now, you and I might disagree with that, but that horse also is out of the barn. And so, you know, we're sitting there in a state where I'm going to drive down to the Twin Cities this weekend, Kelly, and I'm going to stop at Clearwater because I'm going to pick up a Diet Pepsi and I'm going to keep on rolling. And by the way, I'm going to pick up some great bread from the bakery there. But I'm going to see 15, I think last time I counted, charging stations there. I don't need them. I don't need them. But someday I'm gonna. And so that's on the way to the Twin Cities already. What if I'm heading to Dickinson where you grew up? I mean, I'm going to need them somewhere along the way.
So I think two things can be true at once. One, I think the customers are going to demand significantly more electric vehicles, and we're going to burn more fossil fuels in 10 years than we do right now. I think both of those things are accurate. My point to all of this is the timelines that the Democrats have put forward simply do not and cannot work if we can't get the infrastructure in the ground. And there is nobody in the regulatory framework, whether it's NEPA, whether it's EISs, on either side of the aisle, by the way. We've done this in the Climate Crisis Committee, that thinks it's humanly possible to get this infrastructure in the ground in the timeframes the Democrats put forward.
But then you won't spend the money.
Well, you think that's how the federal government works? They'll put the charging stations in whether they have the infrastructure or not. That's the problem with all of this.
Well, okay, we can debate charging stations all we want. Yeah. What got my attention on charging stations, and count me in with, I don't want electric vehicle. You know that, but hold on a second, Congressman. What had me go in was the fact that I don't going to have any choice. These manufacturers are going to sell me a vehicle that I got to charge.
Manufacturers are going to sell vehicles people buy, and if they can't get the infrastructure in the ground in a meaningful way, we'll see what happens as that moves forward.
Okay, I'm going to keep this video, and you and I can debate it again.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I just listen. The regulatory regime that exists makes it almost impossible for them to get to maintain the current infrastructure. There's a reason we're having reliability and resiliency conversations about our grid. Some of those are private sector neglect. Some of those are regulatory burdens. All of that stuff exists. But one of the huge factors is it just simply takes way too long to get this infrastructure in the ground. And that's before you get to the litigation where somebody will file a lawsuit if you potentially kill her for them.
So when we come back, what we're going to do is we're going to get into how government works. How it's you know, and I think the congressman brought up some good points about that. So stick around. We're going to keep going down the road together. North Dakota's lone United States Congressman Kelly Armstrong hung in there. He's still in the rig, going down the road with us. What I wanted to ask him, because if you want to get something done, you got to be able to negotiate, as he said in the first segment, with both sides of the aisle. And yet the Democratic side of the aisle, which I hail from, I get that, can't seem to get along. They can't seem to push anything where they can agree. And I'm curious, you know, I'm going to throw you the softball, Congressman. How do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, when you're in the minority, it's, you know, it's frustrating. I served for 6 years in North Dakota in the majority. I much prefer that. I also much prefer legislating at the North Dakota level. But I guess I would, you know, we went through, before I got to Congress, we went through that with the Freedom Caucus, right? I mean, they sank bills that were negotiated on Republicans on that side, and it cost us our majority. Most people will say that's what led us to doing the majority, but I just don't understand, and maybe you can help me with this. If you win the Senate majority in a 50-50 in a special runoff, President Joe Biden wins the election, both people get more votes than either side has ever gotten in history, and you lose 15 seats in the House on your way to the smallest majority in recent history. I don't understand why Bernie Sanders and Representative Jayapal think that is an absolute progressive mandate. I just don't understand it. And I think one of the reasons you continue to hear about the filibuster is because they continue to bring that up. But I think the reality is, and I think this week has proven it, it's not that they need 60 votes. They don't have 50 votes. Mm-hmm. They don't have 50 votes.
Yeah. Well, if you're looking for me to explain why Bernie Sanders believed that's a mandate, you're going to wait a long time. And you're going to wait a long time for me to explain why the agenda advanced by Bernie Sanders cannot be compromised on.
And I don't mean it from an ideological standpoint. I just mean it from a political judgment.
Yeah. Well, but let me give this to you. You know, at some point, they're going to do something. They are. I'm not going to mention a number. I'm not going to mention that. I'm going to mention the fact that there's going to be so much pressure. Joe Manchin is very, I know him, and I know how practical he is. Something is going to happen. Kyrsten Sinema, I don't know her. I think I've met her once. She sees John McCain when she looks in the mirror in the morning, and the truth of the matter is, she's playing dangerous because she isn't from the same party as John McCain, and so I can't figure her out. I think she's putting her seat and her position in danger. But the reason I break that down like that is you're right. They need 50. And it's my personal belief that Manchin will vote to do it with 50 votes if he gets to the numbers he wants. And I'm curious what your take on that is.
I think you're right on the Senate side. I think one of the things that functionally happens is, and I think this is kind of a issue with Joe Biden, President Biden, because he was a creature of the Senate. They negotiate a deal that's, we can pick whatever number, 1.5 trillion.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if they have the votes in the House then. I don't know what the Progressive Caucus does in the House. This is a very, I mean, the only thing politically I can equate it to, again, is, you know, the Tea Party and then the Freedom Caucus movement. The progressives in the House, their caucus is very large, and they are getting very much more organized. They have their own whip operation now, so they can cut all the deals they want. I don't know if you saw the article about Senator Schumer and Manchin agreeing in principle in July to a $1.5 million or $1 trillion reconciliation package. Well, I can tell you that didn't go over very well with a lot of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the House. So I don't know what this looks like. But if the reconciliation package dies a fiery death, I think you will see huge bipartisan support for an infrastructure bill.
Well,
But I don't think you'll see that until that happens. And
what
whether there's votes on either side to pass it, then I don't know.
what if they advance the infrastructure bill and don't advance the reconciliation bill? Because clearly you've done the math when it comes to reconciliation. So my question of you is pretty simple. Would you vote for the infrastructure bill if you knew that that was the only piece of legislation? Because it seems to me that there's a lot of Republicans out there that the infrastructure bill helps.
Oh, I think there are. I don't know. I'd have to take. I really haven't looked at it that way yet. It'd be one. I don't think it'd be the same bill. I think it'd have to come back. But two, I'm not voting for any of this until I know what happens with the 3.5 trillion chaser behind it. I'm just not.
Well, but you just described what the reality is, which is not going to be 3.5. That they don't have the votes to do 3.5. But you do know that an infrastructure bill is going to be coming your way. And your two colleagues in the Senate, no one's going to say they're liberal. Have both come out in favor of that infrastructure bill. So what's it take to talk you into it, Congressman?
Before I'll even consider it, I need to know the back end chaser, whether it's 1.5, 3.5, 2.5 is dead.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think it's the same bill.
Well, if nothing else, I got you to say that 3 times. You're consistent.
Yeah.
Congressman, I hope you feel better soon, and I hope you get out of that doggone house soon.